Okay, guys, please settle down. We have a next speaker here, Tomáš Paník, and the topic will be Windows containers in action. So,
hello everyone. Welcome in my presentation. It's quite challenging for me to present the Microsoft and Windows related presentation on Red Hat conference, but hopefully it will be useful for some of you. So first, something about me.
The mic is not working.
Can you hear me? Oh yeah. So I will put it closer. Okay. I will try to speak louder if it doesn't work that well. Okay, so I work in SolarWinds and I'm software engineer, so I will be representing this role. And I'm leading the continuous integration delivery community in the SolarWinds. And actually, SolarWinds is building the mainly Windows product. The reason why I'm saying it that for us, actually the fact that the Windows containers made it to production, it was huge because we could start benefiting from containerization of our applications and so on. And therefore, I would like to share with you some of my experiences with that. And do some demo, some real demo, how it works. So briefly talk about the history, how it actually happened. The Microsoft and Docker started to talk about bringing the containers into new Windows Server in 2014. And in 2015, they made actually first technical preview where it worked. They introduced there the container support, including Docker support. And also, they introduced something like PowerShell containers, but they abandoned that right after because the community didn't like it. And in 2016, they actually made that to production, to the release. And what it actually means, the Docker or containers on Windows, it's not like virtualization. It's really the native Docker engine runs on Windows Server, also on Windows 10. And the API is the same like you are used to in the Linux. So those clients like Docker client and Docker Compose, also the Swarm works there. So the Swarm can talk with the node, with the Windows node. They created two base images there, Windows Server Core and Nano Server. The Windows Server Core is like compatibility one. It's really huge, like 4 gigabytes of size. And most of the features you are used to with the Windows Server works there. So when you are migrating your monolithic ASP.NET whatever application to the containers, you better start with this one. And then once you start migrating some of the parts to microservices, to .NET Core, you can move some of the parts to Nano Server. And also Microsoft introduced something like Hyper-V containers. Hyper-V containers, they are normal native containers. They work the same way like on Linux, so that the containers share kernels with the host. The Hyper-V containers is different. It has its own kernel. It's somehow virtualization there. But the reason why Microsoft created them is mainly they wanted to make a little bit more layer of isolation, and also they are planning to somehow support the Linux containers on Windows as well. So you as developer, you will be able to deploy the Linux applications like in container through Hyper-V containers on Windows 10, for example. Okay, so now, I'm so sorry. Yeah, quick question. No, it's the fact is that in Windows it's still running only Windows. So this for the same reason why in a Linux container you can't use the Windows related features. The same way in Windows containers you can't use the Linux related features. So you can use only Windows applications there. So currently you cannot like run the normal traditional Linux containers on Windows. Yeah, it's not possible. We will pass the question in the end. I will just pass my quick demos. Okay, so I have the Azure virtual machine prepared here with the Windows Server 2016. So I can run the normal commands you are used to, the list of images. You can see here that I have the Windows Server Core and Nano Server images. So now I can run the interactive container from Windows Server Core and run PowerShell there. So right now it will spin up my Windows container and create interactive PowerShell session. So right now I'm in container. So whatever changes I do here and exit the container will not affect the host system. So I can list the files, it has the operating system, and I even see the process which I start here, I even see in the Task Explorer of the host. So the next thing what I can do is that I can, for example, do volume mapping. Like I can map the current directory to the folder called map inside a container. Running in PowerShell. Oh, I forgot the IT command, so it will probably leave immediately. Yeah. So I can do this stuff the same as you are used to on Linux as well. It supports the volume mapping, port mapping. Also, each container has its own IP address, like virtual IP address in the system. So I can see the mapped folder here, and any changes there will affect the operating system there. I see my documents there. What also, as I mentioned, that in technical preview they somehow tried to create something like PowerShell containers, but then they abandoned that. So they ended up only with Docker containers, but they created the PowerShell command list to be able to control them. So I can use the Docker CLI, but I can also use the PowerShell CLI, which works against the same endpoint. Like to get container, it will get the same container, list of containers. I can do something like this, like to remove all the containers which I have in there. And it's a little bit easier than using some processing and pipelines using the Docker CLI. Well, okay. So, what about the real use cases? How you could get the value from this in your organization? So, let's imagine you have some ASP.NET monolithic application, which is .NET 4 or older .NET, not migrated to .NET Core yet. So what you can do with this is that you can containerize that as is, like put that to containers, use the benefit of containers in your DevOps stuff. So you configure the IIS. You as a developer take responsibility over the configuration. You configure the IIS inside the container, whatever else inside the container, and then give the container to the IT operations to deploy that. So the first step would be to actually create the container from your application. And then, as I told, in Swarm you can create, for example, one Linux node, one Windows node. You can combine them in a single swarm, in Docker Swarm. And as your architecture evolves, you can break down your monolithic ASP.NET app into the microservices, convert some of them to .NET Core, and you can even combine them with the Linux applications like proxy cache service like nginx. You can run on top of that and combine it together in a single swarm. So that this is really like that the fact that this is coming to Windows applications is really big for you guys who are using the C# and .NET and so on.
What about classic ASP? Can they also be containerized?
The classic ASP.NET?
Classic ASP applications.
Yeah, I guess I will show it. I have the example ASP.NET application, and I guess every ASP.NET application can be put into this container.
May I have a question?
Uh,
How does it work with licensing? If I download the SQL server from Docker repository and I have no license, how does it work?
The Microsoft offer the SQL server in the container, but only the express one. They claim they will not do this for the official like licensed one. Okay, so what else you can do with this is that you can also prepare the container for building. So for example, if you have built infrastructure, some kind of agents, usually you install the Visual Studio and whatever you needed for building all your applications that you do in the company. But you can prepare the containers for each app, like define the requirements, use the MS Build tools. I will show it also. So this is, I prepared some example app, which I'm going to show you. And I'm going to build it inside a container. I'm going to pack that into the image, and I'm going to, I will try to deploy that. So I have the ASP.NET app here. That doesn't matter what's there, it's just a single page which generates some GUIDs. And I have the Docker file which defines requirement for building. So it's based on Windows Server Core. It uses the shell, PowerShell. And now I'm defining what needs to be installed for the building. So I enable ASP.NET 4.5. I install the Chocolate. I recommend you to use that for this kind of purpose, because something like apt-get for Windows, some kind of repository of scripts which are downloading applications. So I'm using that here to install the build tools like MS Build, NuGet, targeting pack of .NET 4.2, which I have the source code in, and some other dependencies like web deploy and targets to publish website and so on. So all I needed to actually build the app. Now I'm going to prepare the container to build this container. So I'm going to build folder and run docker build like DevConf build and dot. Oh. I've already done that so that it took all the layers from cache. So I don't have to wait for it. It takes like half an hour. And now I'm going to build the application using that. So I docker run, use volume mapping to actually map my local directory to c.crs and use my DevConf build. Right? So now it should, like, using my old dependencies, it should compile, restore the NuGets, compile the website. Hopefully it works. Yeah, it took some time to spin it up. So on the host, I don't have anything. I don't have Visual Studio. I don't have the .NET. So now I'm building just inside a container. Once this is done, I'm going to use my second Docker file, which I'm just going to show briefly. And it just defines the runtime need for my app. So I just need a ASP.NET. I configure IIS, and it's based on Microsoft IIS. So I'm going to deploy that to IIS. Okay, so let's do it. Docker build DevConf QID and build it from here. It will take several seconds. It takes all my build files and create a Docker image from that. After this is done, I could spin the container and have this live. So this was example of how this could be used. How you could basically take your existing .NET ASP.NET applications and containerize it and use all the containers in your organization as a benefit. I will wait till this is done and show to you how that it works. Okay, now it's exposing the layers, the startup command. So let's start it. DevConf QID. So now it should be running. I didn't map that to any port, so I'm going to just figure out what's the internal IP address to open the browser and see that it's actually running. Okay, this one. Just happened. Okay. The first flow is always slow because the IIS is doing some initialization work. So it's up and running. I don't have IIS in the host operating system, and I have containerized the ASP.NET application. So, okay. So what's next? What's the future work? Microsoft claims that it's production ready, so you can use that in your workloads. You can play with it. The Microsoft states that they are going to work on the orchestration integration. The Docker Swarm is already running. It's already working with that. It was already demoed in some of the previous conference. But I don't know how Kubernetes and this kind of orchestrators, they probably will need some work from community. And of course, as they claim that they are going to introduce the support for Linux containers inside the Hyper-V containers. So that will be also very big improvement for you developers. I have some reference materials. The last one is the actual source code, which I just shown, and some official Docker sources. So do you have any questions? Thank you.
So I looked into the Docker shim layer, which was provided by Microsoft to actually wire out the syscalls from the kernel to give the capabilities of running containers, and it seems very, very Docker specific. Do you know if some of those features of containers are actually able to be used for providing like compartments or like doing more secure applications, or is it like kernel interface which is like either do containers or you can't use it?
So the question was, I probably didn't understand answer the start.
You can just use parts of the container infrastructure to secure your applications. Like for example, you can remove parts of your file systems from your application that you cannot see it. And
Yeah.
in Windows, it looks like it actually sends down pretty much the Docker configurations down to the Windows kernel to do containers. And I wondered if Windows API, and if it can be used like that you can, for example, give your application its own network stack, but not its different file systems. Right now it seems like either you take it all or nothing.
So the question was about the security of the containers, if you can somehow modify the file system of the container, right?
No, if you can, for example, just use the IP address features or the networking features of containers. Right now you have to also create a new file system namespace in Windows kernel.
Oh yeah. Regarding networking, as far as I know, I'm not from Microsoft guy, so I only know the stuff which I tried. So from the networking, it currently works the service discovery. What works like if you have Docker Compose and you name the container inside the container, it should have this name. So this was already implemented, and this networking stuff is all based on already existing virtual networking, which were before in the Windows Server. So the virtual network there is not it. So only the ports you map there may access to the container. So I think this is the same like in Linux. Any more questions?
Yeah. Do you run containers in production on Windows? And if yes, do you run Hyper-V containers or Windows Server containers?
The question was whether we run the containers in production. In my organization, we use that currently just for the testing, that we pack up into the container, and as part of the end-to-end testing, we spin up multiple instances of it and run the test against that. We don't use that in production yet, but hopefully it will get closer to that. So since we don't use that at all, so we don't use Hyper-V containers neither.
So, and do you prefer Hyper-V or Windows Server containers? Because you cannot run Windows Server containers on Windows 10. So.
Yeah, in Windows 10, the Hyper-V containers is the only option which you can run. So as a developer, you probably will use the Hyper-V containers. I don't fully understand why they actually wanted to make the higher level of installation with Hyper-V containers on Windows Server. So I would recommend trying with the native ones in production, and if it, well, I don't currently know the reason why it shouldn't be enough for you. Probably didn't understood your question, but didn't answer your question. Okay.
Just I was interested in your experience because I tried both, and the Windows Server containers behaved quite strange in my environment. So I was interested in your experience.
Yeah, we use that currently just for testing. Okay, the last question. Okay, you?
Is it present in all installation of Windows Server 2016, or do you need to install something?
The question was whether it is present in all installation of Windows Server. You have to enable it, but in all actually licensed editions of Windows Server, it should be possible to enable that. So you have to go to, if you install the completely new, you have to enable the container feature there, and you have to install the Docker and Docker engine and Docker clients. Okay, so thank you very much.
Hello. Do you hear? Okay. Hi. Hello.
Let me introduce our another speaker, who's Janif Bronheim from Red Hat, who will be speaking about metrics collection.
Hi, everybody. We have 20 minutes, so let's try to. I have a lot that I want to say. My name is Janif Bronheim. I work at Red Hat for the last 4.5 years, and I work around the Overt community mostly. If you've been in the keynotes, it's the upstream of Red Hat Virtualization. And we'll talk about it also during this talk. In the last year, as a developer at Red Hat, and at Overt, I've been exploring the area around the data flow and the information that we have in our project and what we can do in Overt. Basically, in this talk, I want to show you how easy it is to break your architecture, the architecture that you have, and define your requirements for data processing or what you need from your app, and use open source tool, which is quite cool and easy to do, and I'll show you examples and how it can be done. So we're referring about information that we have in our project. Every project is different, and it's very general here, but most of us have operation flows that we want sometimes to follow or maybe count, do things like that. We have the traffic information that we have in the system. Then we can see overloading for scaling abilities, failures in the system that we want to count, maybe to show things around the fails that we have, and disk operation. Each of those can be collected in a different way, and our app already define a way to collect the information in different ways. The most common way that you probably have in your system, it doesn't matter what application you maintain, we have logs in the system. Most of us have logs. The logs contain timestamp, severity, and the message, and we can parse it and build graphs around it or do whatever we want. We'll see what we want in the next slide. But there is another way to collect information, which are metrics. If you're not familiar with that, it's a time series information that we all have. And there is a convention of how to keep this information in a way that we have tools that can work with this information and allow us to build cool stuff around it. So the metric is basically a key and value records that you want to keep, also with a timestamp. And there are a few types of those metrics. There is specification that defines the format of it. We have gauge, rate, counter, and count. It's different terms of metrics that we can collect. We can do a lot of stuff with that. What stuff can we do with information? Just in general, depends on the application that you develop. It can be a data analysis to define auto-scaling abilities, alerts in the system, or billing if you maintain a data center and people use your data center, billing around storage, for example. Correlate between different information that you have from different resources. If you have a lot of information in your system, you will see it in one of the examples. And to keep historical information with aggregation abilities or scale abilities, depends on what you need. So it's all based on the requirements that you have in your own project that you have. So basically what I'm trying to do here is to show you how I broke the components that I have in my system in the design and define the tools that I want to work with. So basically we all have those components in some way. So let's see what are they. We have the thing that report information, which can be your service, your daemon, your project, your hardware, whatever it is. And it uses a client to send the information from the program itself. A client can be an SDK, Python for this specific shipper, which is the transporter of the information. A client can be also a log file, for example. The shipper is a component that allows you to serialize the information and pass it to some store. In a different ways, it could be different transportation protocols. It can do the serialization for the information to fit the store structure. If it's a JSON, for example, the shipper is responsible to get the metrics information and parse it. The store can have many abilities, aggregation abilities, as we talked. If I want to keep historical information for 5 years ago, and I don't care about every second of the information that I collected. I want to aggregate the information that I save for a longer time, for example. And then the visualization, whatever it is, can grab the information, fetch the information, sample the information from the store, and visualize it as we want. If it graphs our alerts that we have in the system, it's the visualization of the information that we have. So those components, we all have it in some certain way. We sometimes combine parts of it. For example, in log parsing, we have the client as the log file, and we just parse it with some kind of a code that parse it and store it. So that's the example of how you can break your app up and can use this structure to define the tools that you want to work with. This is a simple example that really shows the basic abilities that you can get by using tools. In this project, I have like multiplayer games. My clients can connect to a console, they can chat and define a server that they want to play together, a game that I wrote. And I use a cloud provider to run VMs, and the servers that I run, the daemon, runs on it. And the players, if they want to start a game, I start the daemon for them, and they all connect to this IP address that it exposes. Basically, I use logs in the system for everything, also the games and also the incoming communication, the scores, and I used to parse these logs and show a nice dashboard for my gamers, just for fun, to see what's going on with other games. And I wanted to have more information in my dashboard to know if I want to scale it up, because I don't want to use cloud provider specific abilities like the watchers that they have there or the scaling that they provide with them. I want to have my own monitoring. So I decided that I need to break it down. I want basic store and basic dashboard for historical information that I have about the hardware stats, about things that happens on my machines. I don't want something like huge with scalable abilities and aggregation abilities just to save the information. I want to set some alarms and events around this information to know when I want to start another VM, maybe to scale down also, if I don't want to use those resources anymore, I don't need. But I want also to continue to parse my logs to have the same dashboard that I had before. Looking at that, I understood that I can use metrics in this for the basic information, and somehow need to use the log. So first thing first, the metric analysis, the information about the hardware itself. Apparently, it's very easy to get it by installing a component that's called collectd. It's an open source tool. collectd, it's a service daemon that you run on the server on your entity, if it's a server or VM or container even, and it uses a lot of built-in plugins written in C that collect the information for you about CPU usage, about memory, network, really cool stuff. And all I needed to do is to run this daemon on each of the instances that I have for getting the information. And I use a simple store and visualization abilities by using Graphite, which is, I started a Docker instance of that. And then the information is passed very easily to this Graphite instance and can be shown in very easy way with graphs. I see all the hosts that I have and the plugins that I enabled, and I can build this nice dashboard around it and just by clicking on the fields in the tree that you saw before. And this is what I wanted in this specific requirement, just to see what's going on in my system sometimes, which didn't have to be as part of my code. And I can just use it by installing this tool. I will show samples of setups that I did later that will show you how easy to configure CollectD with just the conf file that I comment out the plugins, and that's it, I have it. For the logging serialization and the dashboard that I had before, I decided also to use some tools instead of doing it as part of my code. So it's a very common, if you heard about it, common stack that's called ELK, which is a combination between 3 tools, Logstash, Elasticsearch, and Kibana. Not to confuse everybody, just those tools, it's in the same structure that we saw before. The Logstash is some kind of a shipper. Elasticsearch is a database, scalable database that works with JSON structures, and Kibana allows easily connect to the store and allow me to build cool stuff around it. So I want to read all the logs files that I have from every host, and to scale up, like I have many games on the system, I put something that's called FileBit. This is the icon of FileBit. It's a Google tool that they developed. It's always tail the files that I have and forward it to anywhere I want. In this case, I used Logstash. Logstash is also quite easy. Also in FileBit, I specify the sources and the output. Where do I want to output it? I give it the IP of the Logstash. The Logstash is also a service that I can install anywhere I want in the architecture, at the central area, a central location, or on each of the hosts. It serializes the information for me and forward it to Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch keeps the information, and Kibana shows it. And then I can build graphs based on the information that I have. The plugins for the UI sometimes are not open source for Kibana. I need to say that. But it's a really cool thing, and it's very easy to configure and work with it. OK. So this is the first simple example of using this breakage of the architecture and define the tools that you want to use. For another example, a bigger example, I will show over. This is the main project. It's Redis virtualization, as I wrote before. It's a large management system that allows you to maintain a lot of infrastructure in your data center and run virtual machines with this management system. It allows you much more, a lot of configuration abilities and migration abilities if you're familiar with virtualization. But if not, it's OK. I'm just using it as a use case. So this is the basic architecture that we have in this project. We have the physical hardware that we maintain. We have an engine that always pulls information from this host that we have in data center. And we have some bigger store place for the historical information. We use Jasper which is not an open source project, that took this information and built a report for us. BDSM is a service that runs there and gives me the information that I used to have now in our dashboards. What I needed to do here is to define the requirements that I want in this project. The requirements were, I want to collect the basic information and remove this logic from my main components because I want my daemon to be responsible for what I want instead of having this reading as well, if it's reading from files on the system or whatever it is. I want to also have information about different entities that I have in the system, like the overt engine, for example. Here I have information only from the physical host that I maintain. I want to build monitoring and dashboard the same as I had before, but I want to keep it in a very large scale. I have much more information that we used to work before, and I want to aggregate information after a while, which I didn't need to do before. And the other thing is, most complex thing is to correlate between the information that comes from everywhere. In overt engine, we define also logical entities in this case. If you're familiar with virtualization, in virtualization you define a cluster of hosts that in this cluster you can have migration. This information, which host is related to what cluster, is part of the overt engine database. So if the overt engine also reports information to some central location, and the host also reports this information, specific information about their hardware, I need a way to correlate this information if I want in the historical database to get reports about specific cluster, which host was related to this cluster, and things like that, which makes it much more complex. Okay, this is the problem. The solution that we decided to do is this. We want, instead of using VDSM, the main component we have that sends the information, reads the information, we use also collectd in this case, which is really simple and easy. We install it, deploy it as part of our deployment mechanism. collectd will send information that I want, specifically in this case. And fluentd is the shipper in this case. We decided to use fluentd and not Logstash in this specific requirement just because we had more requirements that we wanted to fit to, like to be aligned with other products that use fluentd and we want to integrate with, for example. So fluentd is a shipper, same as Logstash. I defined a serialization format for the information that I get, also from logs, also for metrics, and it places the information inside a JSON structure. This JSON structure it's on each of the servers. I put it like this because each of the servers will run those services in parallel to the rest of the things that we install in it. And this forward information to a centralized fluentd, which in this configuration of the fluentd, I correlate the information, as I said before, from over the engine and the host information that I get. And it stores in Elasticsearch in the same way, as we showed before, which allows me the scalabilities and also aggregation rules that I can define, which make it much easier for me to keep the information if we compare it to the way we did it today. Then we use Grafana and Kibana to build a dashboard. We want to pick between those solutions to build a dashboard, visualize the information as we want. Grafana is more intuitive and easy for our needs. It's like query-based, so we can define a query for information, and it helps us also to correlate between different data. And this is how it looks like. In Kibana, you get the JSON structure, if you see here, about each of the entities that you have. It's a bit complex to understand, but I just want to show you a record that I get. Every record looks like that. We have the timestamp, like a metric. Also, the log is parsing in the same format, so I have a correlation with also logs, also the metrics information that I got from collectd, and also the engine information. Really strong thing. Also, the server log is part of it, if you run with JPost. And then in Grafana, I get all those abilities to show very cool graphs very easily. It's, as I said, it's query-based. I write it the plugin that I want from specific host name in this case, and then I get this graph, and it's based on the time interval that I want to see. It's aggregate information, of course, based on rules that I set. Very easy. The idea that I want to show, as I said before, is that we broke it. We understood what is the client in this case, if it's a file or my daemon that I want to send with it the information that I have. Then what shipper I want to use to serialize the information. What store to use depends on my requirements. And the visualization depends also in the feature that you want to use with it. There are many tools out there. I'm not an expert in any of them specifically, but I use them. Each tool can provide you different abilities. You don't need to explore the abilities, but you need to understand what are your requirements in your specific project. If it's a web application, it's a web application or that you want just to count the logins or count the advertisement that you present to the user. If it's a virtualization management system, which is basically maintain a lot of hardware information, what you want to achieve with the visualization, if it's alarm or just visualize the information or having logic behind it, what API is exposed to get information, So we want the data. We have different ways to collect it and different ways to process it. It's a very good thing to have in your system because it allows you much more with really minimal effort. You don't need to touch code. You just need to configure it properly. I have here a setup blog that allows you to understand how to use that and also what we did in Overt and many tutorials out there that now when it's up in your mind, you can go and reach your solution that fits to you. And that's it. Questions? Yes? Specifically in Overt and virtualization. Okay. He asked if I have my own virtualization visualization abilities to show my information, my hardware information, the data set that I have. And now I use Grafana, for example. And this also provides graphs. How do I do that? How do I combine between the two? And in Overt specifically, we have the plugins, API plugins that we can add. So you can add a new tab which shows you the output that Grafana gives you. Exactly. For Overt specifically, I can touch it that way. But if I don't want to use it that way, I can grab the information in my code and show it as I want. I not have to use it that way. I can work also directly with the Elasticsearch store and also present information in my way. Overt is my team leader. He says that if you didn't hear, it's not calling an API plugin. I'm sorry, it's a UI plugin, and you can implement it yourself if you want. We don't provide it currently. We'll see where we get, specifically in Overt. Any more questions? Okay, we still have 4 minutes. Yes?
Regarding the plugins, when I want to create my own plugin, how do I do that? Program it in Python or something?
No, what do you refer to Overt or to some certain?
For example, I want to integrate my visualization stuff into Overt. So how do I create such a plugin?
To Overt. Okay, this is not related to this talk. I'm talking about the tools to gather the information. How do you do that? You can search for that in Overt, or you can check for UI plugins, right? You have also a blog for that. Also, me.
Overall, we have the ability to have plugins on the UI side. You need to install. You can write in any technology you want the UI part, and you can add. You can basically install it on the engine machine itself, whether it's an RPM or just put the files there with the plugin definition. And it allows you to add new main tabs. For example, if you work with Overt, you know that.
So I can add my tab into the.
Yeah, so you can add another tab on the Apple part. You can add buttons in various places there.
Who of you, by the way, works with Overt?
We give you some kind of API internally in order to access different objects, like to read different objects, etc. Or you can use the REST API of Overt in order to do everything you want.
You all know about Overt, use it? So those of you that don't, 3 years ago I talked about it. Overt is the management for virtualization. There you can maintain all your hardware, host, storage, and networking, configure it, and very central place, which is the Overt engine. So if you're not familiar with that as well, I really encourage you to check that out. It can be a replacement for other product that you maybe use. It's fully open source. We have the upstream community. It's very maintained. If you want more information specifically about Over, just contact me. More questions? Thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You can take the water with you.
I haven't had more
Why
time.
did you pick Elasticsearch instead of InfoSDB, let's say?
It depends,
If you have-
specifically,
if you
unless
have,
it-
Grafana in front of
Yeah, we can have Grafana also in Fluent DB.
and actually it has a better ability to create the queries.
To queries.
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought about it, but the main problems that we had is that we wanted. Whoop. Wait. Wait, I'll just turn it off.
Test, test, test.